Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries Leadership Development Interview Series. My name is Michael Clark, host of the podcast. I'm joined today by my guest, Mike Lombardi. Mike, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And Mike, just because a lot of people probably, there's a lot of people that probably are familiar with who you are actually, and we'll get into why that is. But for those that don't, or those that maybe don't know all of your backstory, I want to give a little bit of a bio on you before we start. So Mike is currently president of MLBC, a business consulting firm that provides advice to insurance companies on a variety of topics. He's also had roles at RGA, at Tillinghast, which is now part of WTW. Mike is also a past president and board chair of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, as well as the Society of Actuaries, and is currently, while we're recording this in July of 2025, president-elect of the International Actuarial Association. And Mike is based out of the Toronto, Canada area. So Mike, like I said, it's probably more likely than not that people do actually know who you are, at least by name.
Well, not everyone. Yeah.
But for those that don't, now they have a little bit of your backstory. But for those that even if they do know Mike Lombardi, there's probably some interesting things that they don't know about Mike that I wanted to go through as Mike and I were prepping for our conversation today. First, the interesting tidbit here is that becoming an actuary was not Mike's first career choice. In fact, while he was in university, he was studying medicine with the intent of becoming a doctor. Okay, I have to ask, at what point did you say, no, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be an actuary?
Oh, well, it was when I looked for a summer job. Um, the job was with an insurance company, Standard Life in Montreal, and that's they were looking for actuarial trainees. And I said, "Wow, hey, this is really mathematical." I was always good at math, but I never knew what to do with it. I had stumbled into medicine because it looked like a career that I could explain to my parents and that type of thing. Whereas being a math teacher was about all I ever knew you could do with math. So once I worked at Standard Life that summer, I said, "Wow, this is great." So I switched majors.
Interesting. All right. Well, good. Well, it's benefited all of us too, obviously, with your leadership roles and throughout the profession. But actually, there's something else that you touched on there that I want to dive a little bit deeper on. So, um, anybody that listens to you talk now can hear that little Canadian accent going on. But you actually didn't speak any English until you were age 8.
That's
Tell us a
right.
little bit about that.
Well, I was born in Italy, actually, and I was a first generation immigrant. My parents took me to Canada when I was a child. In fact, I was 1 year old, and we spoke Italian at home. And come the time when I had to go to school, grade one, grade two, I struggled a bit, but by around grade two, I finally was able to speak English enough to understand what was going on, and it's history ever since.
Now, obviously, being in Canada, you've also picked up a little French, I understand.
That's right. In Montreal, where I was growing up, was a bilingual city, and we also had mandatory French training at school. But I really only learned to speak French when I actually practiced speaking with other people, rather than textbook French. So yes, I did pick it up.
Interesting. Any other languages? So English,
Well, I
Italian.
studied a little bit of German in college, but I wouldn't say I'm very fluent with it. I had about a year of German,
I do.
and I can
Just
understand a little bit of Spanish, but only because of my Italian, not because I studied it.
that's what I was going to ask. Do you still speak Italian?
Yes, I do.
Okay, excellent. In addition to those things, Mike is also fascinated by world history. He's read all kinds of books about different periods of time and locations, be it Greek, Roman, modern European, American, Canadian, and now fuels that fire by listening to history lectures or podcasts on your daily walks.
That's right.
And then one personal note here. So Mike was president of the SOA the year that I became president-elect of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries. And he was actually the inspiration for me to start writing a blog on LinkedIn and share articles related to the profession when I was president at the CCA, which is in a lot of ways actually the springboard to this podcast that we've been doing now for several years. So Mike, I want to thank you, or maybe at least people know where to, if they don't like what we're doing, they've got somebody else to blame.
Well, that's a very inspiring story. Thank you.
No, it was good. I actually really appreciated what you did there. It gave me, I think, the confidence to try something new, something that I hadn't done but was interested in doing and trying out, and it's actually led me down a number of different journeys that have benefited me and what I do with the professional associations as well as what I do in my day job as well. So
Okay.
very much appreciate that influence there, whether you knew you had it or not.
Okay.
So we talked about what led you to be an actuary, right? You started studying medicine, got a summer job at Standard Life, and said, "Oh, wait, hey, I this is actually interesting." Now, you mentioned when you were studying medicine to become a doctor, it was because you could explain it to your parents. They'd get what you were trying to do.
Right.
What was that conversation like when you went to them and said, "By the way, I'm not going to be a doctor, I'm going to be an actuary"?
To this day, I still could not explain it. So I tried to do the very next best thing, and my mother picked up on it eventually. I told her I was going to be something like an accountant, but much smarter. No offense to accountants.
I'm sure none taken. I'm sure none taken. Well, a lot of those jokes are interchangeable. All right, well, talk to us a little bit about your career journey and the type of work you've done, because you have done a variety of things. We didn't get into
Yeah,
that into your bio, other than the different places that you've worked. But I think people would find it interesting to just hear. You obviously got a summer job working at Standard Life when you were in university, but how did you go from that to being an actuarial analyst to walk us through that career progression?
sure. Just overall, I've had experience with direct companies, with reinsurers, and with consulting firms. So let's walk through it. I started full-time work at Prudential of England, also in Montreal, and that's after graduating from university. And I rotated through different departments, as was the custom back then. So I did pricing, valuation. I did some pension work, group insurance, individual health. There was even P&C department. I worked in that department. In fact, that was where I started, and I actually started taking property and casualty exams, CAS, and later on I switched to life insurance. So that was my Prudential journey. Then I joined Tillinghast, which was a consulting firm, and I eventually led the Canadian life insurance practice. And what we did there was a whole variety of things. We did appraisals, mergers and acquisitions. I took on appointed actuary roles. We did financial forecasting, demutualization. I did a few of those. Embedded value was introduced at the time, product pricing, and a whole bunch of miscellaneous other stuff. Then I left Tillinghast and I joined the reinsurance company, RGA, head office in St. Louis. And I had different roles there. I started off in their international division as chief pricing actuary. Then I moved to chief risk officer for one of the US divisions. And finally, I finished my career there as the head of European acquisitions. And I had a team there based in London. So at that point, I said, what else can I do? So I said, okay, I'm going to start my own consulting firm. And that was about 10 years ago. And I still do consulting to this day.
And most of that consulting is with insurance companies then?
Life insurance companies. Yes, my area of expertise. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, with all of the variety of experiences that you've had, you've touched P&C, you've mainly focused on life, but you've got a lot of strategic roles in there as well. What have you enjoyed most about your career so far?
Well, there's two things I've enjoyed most. One is the work itself and the people I worked with. The work, let's talk about the work. I've always had a deep curiosity about understanding how things work. And actuarial work lets you apply rigorous thinking to real world challenges. You're dealing with financial risk, you're dealing with human behavior, professionalism, business judgment. You're putting together a whole bunch of stuff. It's multidisciplinary. And and then when you look at the topics, you have to learn finance, investments, statistics, regulations and economics. So it's not just getting the numbers right, but to be a good actuary, you have to be able to explain it clearly to people who are making important decisions. And then when I moved to consulting, you add a whole extra layer of necessary self-development. You got to know marketing, oral and written communication, and interpersonal skills. I did say people was the other part. I've worked with incredibly smart colleagues and clients, many of them much smarter than me, but I learned a lot from them. It was very stimulating. And I also like the fact that the profession has this culture of collegiality and integrity, which I value a lot.
Oh, I love that. I really like it. One of the things I jotted down there is just what you said about the profession in general, right? It requires rigorous thinking to solve complex problems.
Yeah,
I think that's a great description. You know, obviously it doesn't get into the nuts and bolts of what an actuary is, but if you were trying to sell the profession to somebody as to, hey, why should you consider this? That is a great summary phrase. You know, applying rigorous thinking to complex problems. I love that. And then same thing with consulting work, right? And I would agree with you that, and I've only ever worked in consulting, but I appreciate the perspective there too on just the additional skill set that you have to apply to that underlying skill set, right, around marketing and communication, and then and I think you're exactly right about the people. This really is a profession where you're dealing with people that have pretty high morals and strong integrity. You have to,
yeah,
right? Yeah, for
correct.
what we do, which but I think you've articulated that really well.
Yeah.
One question that I've been asking people lately, especially people that we'll call more seasoned in their careers, such as yourself, is that if you could give advice to your younger self, knowing what you know today, what would that advice be? Right? You've gone through a lot of stuff, right? You've had different roles, different responsibilities. You've worked at a couple of different companies. You've had pretty visible roles within the profession. Like, if you go back to that kid that's in university that gets this job at Standard Life, like knowing what you know now, what do you tell him?
Well, I could joke and I could say I'd tell my younger self, some really good stock tips, buy Bitcoin for a penny when it comes out or Apple. But to be honest, I'm pretty happy with my career and my life and how it turned out. Um, Maybe I would tell myself, given what I've gone through, maybe I should relax a bit more. I was very intense. Take better care of my health. I could have lost some weight. Spend more time with family because kids grow up so fast. Yeah, so stuff like that. I would say, if I had to give advice, I would emphasize keep learning, young Mike, embrace change, stay adaptable, take some risks every now and then. Aim high, shoot for the stars. If you miss, at least you'll hit the moon. We tend to think too linearly about careers, and growth often comes from stepping outside our comfort zone. So I would emphasize that.
And I think that's really applicable when you're talking to a bunch of actuaries, right? Who tend to be just stereotypically more risk averse than maybe your average person or average
Absolutely. Yeah.
professional. But I think all of those things, especially on the keep learning, be adaptable, like don't be so resistant to change and step outside your comfort zone. Like uh, those are themes that I think are so important, especially looking at where we're at as a profession today and where things are potentially heading with as we get more into AI and machine learning models and
Right.
all the different facets that could change how we do work as a profession.
Yeah, that advice was always relevant, but it's even more relevant today.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will continue to be relevant in the future. I mean, there's always going to be something new, right?
Yeah.
Well, we mentioned in your bio you've had a lot of opportunities volunteering with professional associations, the CIA in Canada, the SOA, now the International Actuarial Association. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your volunteer work. Like, hey, let's start with how and why you got started volunteering.
Well, it actually happened almost by accident. I was in my 30s. I was at Prudential. And at the time, I was in charge of a group life and health division. And somebody called me out of the blue saying, there's an actuarial event coming up. Would you like to speak on some technical topic? It was the taxation of group life and health in Canada, something I knew a little bit about. And I said, okay, I'll do that presentation. I hadn't done any presentation before except internally in the company. And we didn't have PowerPoints then. So I had all these like transparencies and overheads that I had to put together. And and I was kind of nervous. And I typed up my whole speech and I read it without looking once at the audience. And I hoped that there was no Q&A. So I was very nervous. That's how it started. But
where were you? Sorry to interrupt. Where were you at in your career at this point? Like how
this
long had you
was
been
at
working as an
Prudential
actuary?
before going into consulting.
Okay, okay. So
Yeah.
about how many years of experience do you think you had about that?
It was about 6 or 7 years.
Okay, not a lot.
No, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that led me to, or I was asked, you can do SOA grading of exams. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So they called me up and they said, I'd like to do some group life and health exam grading, which I did. So I did central grading. A lot of us has gone through that experience. And I met other people. And gradually over time, I got a little bit more and more self-confident. And I started a little bit more public speaking. And then when I joined consulting, Tillinghast, it's all about interpersonal skills. Visibility is very important for a consultant, networking, etc. So that just built on itself and it just continued. Um, I broadened my volunteering to committee work and other areas of practice. Some of it just so that I could learn a lot more about the practice area and do a deep dive into some of the more technical aspects of actuarial work.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about how you can actually learn more from volunteering in some of these committee roles. And I'm assuming that's not just technically, but also some of those soft skills, like, how do you work with a diverse group of people and moving an agenda forward and things like that.
Absolutely, that's right. A lot of soft skills there.
But I also think it's also important, I think, to acknowledge that you can get a lot technically out of volunteering as well, stuff that you can take back and use in your day job, not just sitting in a session, but being able to collaborate with other people can open up your eyes to different ways of seeing a regulation or an application that maybe you didn't see before.
I'd say a lot of that depends on the actual terms of reference of the committee. Like if it's a very technical committee where you're doing some analysis of universal life valuation or pricing, yeah, you could learn a lot more. But if it's a different committee where you're doing like member services or organizing an event, like a spring meeting, and you're just looking for moderators or speakers for an event, that's more of the softer skill development than the
Mhm.
technical.
And can actually help you broaden your network, like you said, which from a consulting perspective is extremely important. I like how you said that. It helps you develop those interpersonal skills and increase visibility, which
Yeah.
I agree with you for a consultant. That's an important characteristic to develop. Anything else that you gained from volunteering early on that led you to continue volunteering?
Well, I think we touched on this one. I gained a deeper appreciation of the vastness of the field of actuarial science. We talked about the people part. What else would I have gained? Yeah, well, after one talk, I had a young actuary come up to me once and said I changed his whole career path. And that moment stayed with me. It really touched me. It wasn't you, it was someone else. The profession has been very good to me, and volunteering for me is a way of giving back and helping others.
Yeah, which I think it's funny, right? As I interview people and talk about their experiences volunteering, um, there's a lot that will say, I do it to give back, and it's been a great profession, and I like to contribute and give back my time and my knowledge that way. And then I have others, and I tend to probably fall more on this other end of the spectrum, which is like, no, I get so much out of volunteering. Like, sure,
Yeah.
it's great that I get to give back this way, but I'm a little bit more selfish, where I'm like, I'm gaining a lot from doing this. But it sounds like, but I like it. You bridged that gap, right? You said early on, like you were getting a lot out of volunteering that was
Yeah,
more than just giving back. It was
it's
about.
win-win.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah, absolutely. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive either, right? Like if you're gaining skills and you're participating and contributing your time and talents that way, that inevitably you're giving back at the same time.
Yeah.
All right. So you've been in leadership roles too we mentioned the CIA, the SOA, now the IAA, where you've been in those presidential or chair roles. What have you learned from being in leadership roles within the professional association
Well,
specifically?
one of the biggest eye openers to me when I started in leadership as opposed to just a member of a committee is how to get things done. Volunteers are not employees. I learned that the hard way. You can encourage employees with promotions, you can scare them with termination. When you're dealing with volunteers, you have no authority or control over them. You know, if they contribute or don't contribute, the worst that can happen to them is, you know, you get them removed, but someone else has to do the work. So you need different management tools to manage volunteers if you're in a leadership role. You lean a lot more on persuasion, you know, and getting them excited about the vision. What is it we want to accomplish? You know, what's our shared purpose, and that type of thing, and maybe a little bit of peer pressure. So it's very different. In terms of being president, yeah, being president is is not all it's cracked up to be. But let me explain what I mean. About 90% of everything that goes on in any organization, SOA, CAS, CIA, IA, it's automatic. It's on autopilot. It's going to happen anyway. There's going to be an audit of the accounts. There's going to be, annual meetings, et cetera, et cetera. When you're president, maybe you can influence 10% of the direction of the organization, and you have a vision and you have about 1 year to do it. That year will go by very fast. And because it's organization, you learn to rely heavily on people like the executive directors and the staff of the organization. Why do I say that? They're the ones that have institutional knowledge. They're the ones that have all the connection with the stakeholders, which you don't have. They know in and out what the bylaws are, the organizational policies, the voting procedures, which you're going to have to learn that very fast. So you rely on them a lot. And also a lot of what you do as a president is that you're kind of like you're the external face of the organization. You're kind of like the ambassador to other stakeholders. And who are these stakeholders? Other actuarial organizations, you get involved with them. Regulators, you get to speak to them. Employers are an important group, and also universities.
Yeah, no,
And yeah,
all of those are really interesting. Actually, I want to I want to dwell on this for a little bit because I think there's some really interesting things to unpack here. I really like what you said that about being in these leadership roles has taught you how to get things done when you're working with volunteers. Let me ask you this, because a lot of the things that you mentioned about that skill set, how much were you able to apply those then back to your day job? Where you're right, you've got other tools that you can deal with paid employees, but did you find that the skills that you were developing working with a volunteer base actually enhanced what you were doing on the people management side in your actual paid job?
oh yeah, it helped a tremendous amount. It also minimized or eliminated what would otherwise have been confrontational issues because I had different ways of dealing with people, and but by using those skills, I got people to buy into what needed to be done and that type of thing. So those soft skills were really helped in teamwork. Plus, also when you are in an organization like an insurance company or reinsurers, you're still dealing with other departments. So in a sense, those other departments that don't report to you are necessary for your success, and how to get them to cooperate when they have other priorities is something that my volunteer skills help to develop.
No, I love that, and I've experienced that myself, having been in that leadership role and that presidential chair with the Conference of Consulting Actuaries. It absolutely made me a better people manager in my day job,
Yeah.
for sure. So I like that perspective, and then wholeheartedly agree with you too about learning to lean on the staff at the organizations. CCA is no different than the rest. We've got a great group of staff headed by the Kelly Finella, the executive director, and her team, Matt Nonsek and Shannon Peterson, and all the rest of the staff at the CCA that they really do make sure that things continue to happen, because those leadership positions and those board positions, they change. There's constant turnover,
Mhm.
which is great. Well, since you're currently in an IAA leadership role, talk to us for a bit about the role of the IAA within the profession. Why should actuaries pay attention to what's going on at the IAA?
Yeah, I get this a lot. Okay, the IA represents the profession globally. It's an organization of about 75 actuarial organizations around the world in different countries. What does it do? It develops model standards and guidance for members here being the actuarial organizations. It also supports consistent education, ethics, and professional standards worldwide. So to be a member of the IAA, an actuarial organization in Bolivia or wherever would have to meet the syllabus education standards. They'd have to have a code of conduct and things like that. And as I mentioned, this accelerates local actuarial growth in developing countries and also helps modernize regulation. This is especially useful in emerging markets. The IA is also the voice of the profession in international forums. When the IASB, which is the International Accounting Standards Board, or the IIS, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, or even the UN wants an actuarial perspective on something, they're not going to go out and ask 74 different organizations, what's the actuarial input here? They go to the IAA, and the IAA distills feedback and communicates with these organizations. We call them supranationals. Um, or non-governmental organizations. So we bring actuarial expertise to them and a unified voice. What kind of things we bring them? Capital requirements, we comment on those. If they're developing insurance accounting, we comment on the actuarial aspects. There's climate risk. We work with the UN on that. And there's insurance supervision. So if you're an actuary and you're dealing with uh, you're working in a multinational firm or you're dealing with cross-border issues and you're dealing with global risks like climate or cyber risk or AI or pandemics, the IA plays a key role. There's lots of material that's published on that you would want to learn about. So it might look a little distant what the IA does, and it's behind the scenes a lot, but it really does shape the global environment for actuaries and how they operate in everyday life.
So, how can somebody that's maybe interested in getting involved with the IAA, what's the best way to do that? Because as you mentioned, the IAA at its core is an association of associations, right? You've got different associations around the world that belong to the IAA. Um, how can somebody actually get involved with volunteering with the IAA?
Well, there's two ways to do it. The easy way is to sign up for a section. There's about 6 sections in the IA. There's a life section, a health section, a pension section. I might miss a few. There's even a consulting section. And for $60 a year, you can sign up and you can participate in all the sections do. You can even try to run for the board of these sections, which is like the governing body. So that's one way. That's an easier way. The more difficult way is each association, like the CCA or the CIA or the SOA, can send individuals to the IA committees, the working committees. So let's say there's a working committee on insurance regulation or pension or whatever. The IA would ask for volunteers or representatives who wish to sit on these committees and participate in that work. So what you would need is you would need your own actuarial organization to nominate and volunteer you. So if you're nice and you're well known to your leadership in your own organization, and you have an interest in joining a particular committee of the IA, it's up to you and your organization to put your name forward.
That's helpful information, and as it relates to the sections, that's $60 Canadian. I believe is the
That's
annual
correct.
membership fee there, and is definitely worthwhile to participate in those. Just again, you get the same type of benefits that you do with maybe a local association, with networking, with continuing education. A lot of the sections do webinars that are very specialized to, like you said, life or enterprise risk management or health consulting, all of those that where someone can easily get involved with the sections. And I know they're always looking for volunteers. I agree with you. That's probably the easiest way in to the IAA channel is through the sections. But I do think it's important for people to understand too that if they belong to an association, that is a full member association within the IAA, there's seats available for volunteering. And it's just a matter of finding out what those seats are and where there's opportunity. And somebody, even if you haven't volunteered at the local association level, there's still an opportunity to dig in and find opportunities where you
Right.
could potentially contribute on behalf of your local association.
I would say whether you join the sections or whether you're nominated by your own association to sit in on one of the IA committees, one of the big eye openers you'll find is that there are people from very many different countries with different cultures, different levels of ability to speak English. And when you have meetings with everybody in different time zones, the meetings tend to be in very unusual hours to spread the pain.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I sit on the board for the International Association of Consulting Actuaries, one of those sections, and we have one of our board members is based in Malaysia, and so when I'm sitting in on an 8 a.m. Board meeting for IACA, for her it's 11 o'clock at night, and yeah, we end up dealing with some of those time zone issues. I remember sitting in on. When I was part of the council for IAA in my CCA leadership role, those council meetings were being held such that I was up at like 11 o'clock at night, sitting in on those meetings and casting votes. And yeah, you do have to. In some ways, it makes it a little more flexible in terms of volunteering because it can be outside of your normal working hours,
Right.
depending on the group you're working with.
Yeah.
What would you say to, I want to go back, you mentioned part of the IAA's goals here around education and standard setting and setting and a baseline ethical principles for actuaries around the globe. What would you say to actuaries that participate in a maybe a more fleshed out system like in North America, in the US and Canada, especially where you've got associations that have standards of practice and codes of conduct? Why should an actuary in one of these more established regions of the world pay attention to what the IAA is doing on those fronts with education and standards and ethics?
Well, I guess it depends. Like if you're a member of the academy, for example, the education is done by the CAS and SOA, so maybe there won't be much of a link there. And yeah, why should they pay attention? I went over that before with multinational, etc.
Mhm.
And maybe you're asking about whether what they gain from volunteering locally. Is that what you're asking?
But I mean, yeah, that's part of it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, volunteer for your local association. I would say j just start. Don't wait till you're an expert or you feel like one. There's lots of opportunities locally in your own organization, and there's even actuarial clubs and things. So you can contribute. Stay curious, stretch yourself.
Mhm.
As we said, volunteering builds skills, relationships, and you will contribute to the future of the profession. Um, it's not just a way to give back; it's also a way to grow yourself. Some of the best friends you make, in career opportunities, do come from volunteer work. I was a consultant, and I get calls out of the blue saying, how'd you get my name? Oh, because somebody on some committee remembers you, and that type of thing. So connections and networking, it's all fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree with that. I mean, it goes back to that. There's a lot that you can gain personally by volunteering.
Right.
It's another avenue for references, referrals, to work and let alone the friendships that you make. That's definitely been true in my experience as well. For this last little bit, Mike, I want to pick your brain on leadership. This is our leadership development interview series, after all. In thinking about people you consider to be successful leaders, what traits do they have and how do they demonstrate their leadership?
Um, Traits they have. Well, a few that come to mind are they have clarity, they have humility, they're very good listeners, and they're consistent in how they operate. Um, Also, strong leaders elevate others. It's not just about themselves. They're cool under pressure, and they do create an environment where others can thrive. And they're very good at communicating the purpose. Not just what you have to do, but why it matters. Um,
Talk
yeah.
to me a little bit about what you mean with the um, the there's clarity and humility. How does that factor into being a good leader?
Well, if you take the opposite, if you're not clear in your instructions or directions, or if you're not humble, you want to take all the credit yourself, and all the people reporting to them don't get any credit or respect, that creates a lot of negative feelings or bad will, and you won't get the best out of your team if you don't have those qualities.
Yeah, I like that. And that kind of goes along with being consistent, right? I mean, if you've got a leader that's one day is over here, another day is over here in terms of the vision that they're promoting, and
Right.
it's going to be hard to follow someone that is consistently changing course.
Right. You get situations where people say, we need to cut costs. Okay, there's a staff hiring freeze. Okay. And then 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, but a few days later or a few weeks later, why isn't this getting done? Because we don't have the staff. Quick, hire somebody. It's that I think
Yeah,
consistency does not help.
it's pinball leadership in some ways, which is something you want to try to avoid. But I do like what you said too about the ability to elevate others and be cool under pressure, and that they're able to communicate and bring others along with that vision. That's such an important thing, whether that's in your day job and volunteering, whatever you're doing. Like if you really want to be a leader, I think that is an essential skill set as well, being able to articulate the vision, help people see where we're going and how we're going to get there, and then bring people along with you as you move down that path.
Absolutely.
So, who are some of your role models then when it comes to leadership?
Oh, that's a tough question. There's so many people, throughout my career that influenced me, in small or big ways, and a lot of them probably don't even know they did. But one was, I'll point out one. His name was Jeff Guy. He's passed away now. He was my boss at Prudential of England. He later became a chief actuary at Manulife. So, what was Jeff Guy like? He was a no nonsense, no excuse guy. He was energetic. He was incredibly effective. He just exuded leadership and competence. But he was also humble, and he would never praise himself. So typical meetings with him, they always had a clear objective, and they always started on time. Don't show up late. Follow-up actions from the meetings were always clearly established and communicated immediately. You didn't wait 3 months for the minutes to come out. So, within 24 hours, you knew what was to be done, by whom, by when. All those things were filled out. And any potential bottlenecks that were identified early on, they had a clear escalation strategy. You knew what to do if you bumped into some obstacle and or some department that wasn't cooperative. So he taught me the importance of preparation, clarity, and following through. So what I've learned from him and other leaders is quiet authority. You don't need to be in the spotlight. You can just command respect through your actions and integrity. And one last thing, just to be honest, I've learned a lot, perhaps just as much, from ineffective leaders, what not to do.
Yeah, how so? Like, what have you seen is in ineffective leaders that, and I agree with you, by the way. I think you can't overlook the lessons you can learn from the people that are not great leaders.
Right. Well, quick examples. You might have a meeting and there was no purpose to it, and nobody knows exactly what the follow-up is. And so everybody's all confused, and you say, man, I wish we had, a clearer direction and that type of thing. And so the lesson there is you should have clear direction, and so on.
Yeah, no, I think those, and we've probably all dealt with them at some level, right? And I think, no, I think you're spot on. There's a lot to be learned from that. In fact, I can look back on my career and say, there was examples of effective managers and ineffective managers, and you really learn what you like and don't like from those contrasts for sure.
Yeah, you learn from both sides. Yeah,
And I think that's an important point, though, too, for people to realize as they're going through their careers. You're going to have good managers and you're going to have not so good managers, and you can learn from both.
that's right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's better to learn from good managers.
It is, yes. There's definitely a lot you can gain from it. And I will say I've probably learned more from my good managers as well.
Yeah.
Um, so when you think about the profession or the actuarial profession and successful leaders in the future, what do you think are the important skills for them to develop? Knowing what you know now, where we sit today in 2025, what are the skill sets that an effective leader needs to have within our profession going forward?
Well, Michael, we touched upon some of this earlier on. We know that the world is constantly changing. Adaptability is going to be essential. Future leaders basically need to embrace lifelong learning. You don't stop learning after you finish your exams. We must increasingly operate effectively in different disciplines and cultures. Um, I'm not just talking like cultures from different countries. They're just like there's a P&C culture, there's a pension culture, there's a life culture,
Mhm.
there's a reinsurance culture, there's a direct company culture. So culture can be pretty fluid, but there are differences, and we need to learn to respect and understand those differences. There's all the stuff about technology and regulation and geopolitics that is going to shape the future. And so leaders will need to cope with all these things, including AI and climate change and demographic shifts. And one of the most important things, if we want to be good actuaries and good leaders, we need to do what we do best. And what is it? We convert complexity into useful strategic insight. A few other things, ethics and professionalism will continue to matter a lot. We want leaders who lead with integrity. And the best leaders are going to be the ones who stay curious and embrace change.
No, I think those are all spot on and really good advice for people that are thinking about their own leadership skill development going forward. That adaptability, that lifelong learning, that curiosity, I wholeheartedly agree with you that those will be extremely important for people to continue to be successful within the profession. And I do like how you emphasize too that the ability to follow standards and be ethical, have integrity, right? That's so critical, I think, to us as a profession, which is partly what makes us a profession, is that we have
Absolutely, yes.
those standards and that code of conduct, that ethical bar, whether that's in the U.S., Canada, or wherever somebody is at throughout the world, that actually is so critically important to the profession that we have people um, that can adhere to those and operate in that basis and still be adaptable and curious and lifelong learners. Like it's that bedrock foundation, though. I think just it makes it so that our profession can be viable long term,
Yep.
right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, this has been a great discussion. I mean, I've got a lot of great notes jotted down here. Um, Things that I'm taking away. I love we'll call it the sales pitch to being an actuary. It's an opportunity to apply rigorous thinking to complex problems. The advice you gave on to keep learning, be adaptable. I mean, that's come up several times in our conversation, and you can always learn more. There's always something to learn. I also like how you emphasize too the consulting skills that are necessary for people in those consulting roles, and that's as I've thought about what it is to be a consultant, that can be true whether you've got external clients or even as you mentioned, if you're working inside and like an insurance company and you're working with other departments.
Yeah.
You've got those relationships that and strategic partnerships that you have to manage just like you would a consultant. When you start to get into those roles, that those interpersonal skills, that creating that visibility is paramount as well. And then your thoughts on leadership, the again, it keeps coming back to it, the adaptability, the lifelong learning, um, the clarity, humility, all of these great characteristics that you've articulated. I think you've given our listeners a lot of good information to think about and as they look to develop their careers and as they are moving forward wherever they're at in their career journey. So thank you for all of that.
Well, I hope that was helpful, and thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank my guest today, Mike Lombardi. Mike, if people want to connect with you and follow what you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and they could also email me at mike.lombardi@mlbcconsulting.com, or they can phone me. Can I give out my phone number?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, it's 647-960-2894.
There you go. So lots of ways to connect with Mike. I can attest that he is active on LinkedIn, and I expect we'll see more of that. through your tenure in IAA leadership. And I mentioned we're recording this interview midway through 2025 during your time as president-elect of the IAA, but want to give you best wishes for your time as IAA president, which will start in 2026.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Mike, and thanks everyone for joining us. I want to encourage everyone to subscribe and like this podcast to help us share stories like Mike's that can help benefit the actuarial community. The leadership development community of the CCA is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join. I want to thank Shannon Peterson of CCA staff for helping produce today's event. Join us for upcoming CCA events. Follow us online, on social media, and on our website. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks again, Mike, for your time.
Okay, thank you. Bye.